See, do we have any guests on the call? It looks like Dr. Core, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Alex Ford, podiatrist. How we doing, Graham? Are you back from your trip or are you still in California?
I'm home now. I'm back. I was in San Diego for a week and
Oh, how nice.
it's a bit disappointing coming back to the weather today, but what can you do? My mom's also on the call. I think she may be tied up, but Mom, do you want to introduce yourself or are you tied up?
No, I'm fine. I am not tied up. I'm multitasking, but I'm glad to be on the call with you.
Thanks, Mom.
Yep.
Hi, Alex. Great.
Hey, Greg, do you want to lead us in the invocation today?
Yes. You want me to do that now? Okay.
Please.
All right. We're doing a special invocation. Was asked to do a special invocation today as a tribute to a person who was a member of Kiwanis and who recently died. And so just think about what he did. Robert Bourns, a friend of mine and a member of Kiwanis, a wonderful, great man, passed away in Palm Springs this week, devoted to family, devoted to the city of Indianapolis, devoted to the state of Indiana, the United States and Israel. He was a special person. His philosophy was make things better and be a giver. As you probably know, he founded, among other things, Bourns Management, which renovated the Union Station and the Crown Plaza into a train station destination as a hotel and banquet center. But I wanted to dwell for a moment about one thing he did that will be remembered forever. He established with millions of dollars the Bourns Jewish Studies program at Indiana University. It's a program open to all of any background. It has joint degrees with Kelly Business, et cetera. It's a profound part of Indiana University and of universities that do studies in religion. Just before he died, he established something so unusual that I want to make a note of it today, and that is he set up a program inside Bourns that brings the Black studies and Jewish studies together in a joint program to understand each other. That is profound. It's unique to the United States, understanding each other in this troubled times that we have. He was awarded many honorary degrees, Mr. Bourns was, from IU, from University of Indianapolis, from the Indiana Historical Society. But I remember the most important thing was that he was a man who died with a good name. In Judaism and Christianity, dying with a good name is the best. He died with a good name. So let us remember what Robert Bourns strived to do to make things better as we make our city and our Kiwanis do the best that we can do. I think in my quote this week, I said a cultured heart and disciplined mind are elements of power. A cultured heart and disciplined mind are elements of power. Bob Bourns lived that philosophy. May we remember him as always and dream his dreams. Amen.
Thank you, Greg. A couple more announcements before we get to our guest speaker. Also a reminder, we had a number of people who wanted to be on the call today and are tied up. We're recording this. Hopefully that's okay with Tripp. We're going to be really sending this out to our entire club. And remember, this is, we're getting some really great, unique speakers and one of the real great opportunities, to continue promoting what we're doing here as a club. A couple more reminders to vote on the slate of officers by next Wednesday. That's the 10th of August. Hard to believe we're into August now. A reminder, too, that our foundation has awarded more than $175,000 to 44 organizations. Visit indykiwanis.org/grants for information to share with community groups you think might be a good fit. The deadline is 9:30. Again, so remember, a lot of organizations hurting right now and are in need. And let's make sure we get word out there. Roger Cummings, I believe you've got an announcement on the Indiana district. Roger, you with us?
Yeah, hi, sorry. Got a mouthful of ice. I'm sorry, I think what I was going to tell was there's an Indiana District Capital Division and North Metro Division, Indy Metro Division meeting on August, help me out, Kelly, is it 23rd, 24th? It's open to any members of the club. The governor will be there, Governor Obama, and also new incoming governor, Bruce Andrews, will join. And it's a neat evening to talk about things coming up in the district and in our divisions. Dinner is free, so we just need to let them know who wants to come. So if you're interested, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. A couple last announcements. Riley Volunteer Coordinator Susan Schwartz will be at the meeting to invite us to serve as Comfort Card ambassadors for a 3-hour shift every 6 weeks. As a reminder, the Comfort Card provides amenities to families and children staying at Riley. Eric Steele, I don't believe is with us, but wanted me to remind you the golf outing this year is September 19th. We're asking you to fill a golf cart so we can fill up the Magic Castle cart. The foundation provides an annual grant of $15,000 to support this program, which was started in 1997. So please sign up to participate. Now it's a pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. I will say I try to pride myself on reading 30 to 35 books per year. A number of them actually have words. And this is one of the finest books I've read in decades. And we are really honored to have Tripp Mickle with us today. And the book is called After Steve, and it's related to Apple, which I believe almost all of us are customers in some respect, and details the decade following the passing of Steve Jobs, the visionary of Apple. And Tripp and I are going to do a Q&A, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience here. I'm going to ask Kelly to put Tripp's link to the book in. I highly encourage you to purchase this. It's a fascinating read, whether you're interested in Apple, you're interested in corporate culture, leadership. And so, Kelly, if you can put the Amazon link in there. A brief bio for Tripp. He joined the New York Times as a tech reporter in April of 2022. Like I said, he's the author of After Steve, which we're going to talk about, how Apple became a $1 trillion company and lost its soul, the inside story of the power struggle between Tim Cook, Jony Ive following the death of Steve Jobs. He spoke with more than 200 current and former Apple execs. Prior to this, he led the Wall Street Journal's coverage of Apple and Google, documenting its rise to become the first $1 trillion company. He covered the Olympics, NASCAR, hockey, soccer, and action sports for the Sports Business Journal, including attending and reporting on the Olympics in Beijing, Vancouver, London, and Sochi. He's interned as a sports reporter at Newsday, where he was assigned to the Steinbrenner Watch alongside then Times clerk Michael S. Schmidt. The job was to shout questions at the late Yankees owner, George Steinbrenner, as he exited the stadium. That sounds like a very fascinating endeavor, which hopefully you can share more about. He is from Charlotte, received his master's degree from Columbia, and we know he's a really intelligent guy because he went to the best university in the country, Wake Forest, which, if you haven't figured out, is my alma mater as well. So Tripp, really honored to have you here today.
Thanks so much for the nice intro. I appreciate it, Graham. And it's nice to be with everybody. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to connect with people remote for a change. I mean, I guess years ago you couldn't really do this, so this is cool.
Okay, so Tripp, we talked about your background covering the tech world, tackling a book on Apple in this past decade, and the really fascinating transition here was a major task, big endeavor. What inspired you to take this on?
It's funny. Like some nonfiction writers spend a great deal of time like looking for their next idea. I've heard Eric Larson talk about it as the dark country of no ideas, and he often goes to the library and just pulls books off the shelf. Others have ideas kind of fall in their lap, and I'm in the latter camp in this case. It's this book's really an outgrowth of what I was reporting on at the time for the Wall Street Journal. I left our Atlanta, or I'll still say our because I've only been at the Times for a few months, forgive me. But I left the Wall Street Journal's Atlanta bureau in late 2016 and relocated from covering alcohol and tobacco for the paper to San Francisco to do technology reporting and cover Apple. And shortly after I arrived, I grabbed coffee with a local longtime Silicon Valley journalist named John Markoff, who's written a number of books about the industry and its evolution over time. And I was seeking John's advice on how to cover Apple and what stories to focus on. And one of the things that John said was like, I don't know a lot about this, but if I were you, I'd look into Johnny Ive and a place called the Battery, which is a exclusive club here in San Francisco. It's a private members private members club that Johnny Ive was a member at. It was very cryptic. He didn't tell me a lot more than that. But it kind of sparked enough curiosity in me that I wanted to figure out, well, like, what is the deal with Johnny Ive in this place called the Battery? And it was a couple of years later that I was on the phone with somebody, and they said, we would always go to the Battery to have meetings because Johnny had essentially stopped coming to work at that point, and he was just working out of this private club. And there was one time we were there, and he showed up 3 hours late, and it was like, oh, this is what John has talked to me about. Like, why was this guy who helped build what I call a Camelot in Cupertino? Why was he like not engaged in his job anymore? Why was he, so disaffected that he was working remotely from some private club in San Francisco? And that was really the catalyst for the jumping off point that became the book. So, and Graham, I should have probably prefaced that by saying, with a brief synopsis of the book, it's a character study of two figures. I mean, how many of you would say you're like right-brained, and how many would say you're left-brained? Essentially, Apple has had under Steve Jobs kind of the uber right-brained creative type and the uber left-brained operations figure. And the uber right-brained person was Johnny Ive. He's arguably one of the top, if not the most influential industrial designer in the world. And the uber left-brain person is somebody most people are familiar with, Tim Cook, who has done a tremendous job of building incredible value inside Apple and for Apple shareholders.
Yeah, thanks for the backgrounds there. One of the things I'm fascinated about is Apple keeps things very close to the vest. Obviously, with new products, they keep everything under lock and key. You got tremendous access. I think you interviewed 200-ish, maybe more than 200 people. How did you get great access to current Apple employees, past Apple employees, those who could really help you craft this story?
I mean, the advantage of working on a book is that you've got a long time horizon over which you can gather information and do reporting. And you're right, Apple is notoriously secretive. I call it corporate omerta, where essentially everyone who goes to work there kind of takes a vow of silence. I've talked to couples who both work there, a married couple who both work there. They told me that they worked in separate divisions, and throughout their decade plus working at the company, they never told their spouse what they did. It wasn't until years later that they talked about that after they'd retired. And they felt like that was like a confessional moment, like they were almost violating their agreement at Apple to be secretive. So as a reporter, the way I tackle something like that is just to try to be as earnest as possible. Go to people and explain to them what story I'm trying to tell, why I think that story is important, And in this case, the story I was trying to tell was the story of how this company both faced what was for many of them an unexpected challenge, and a challenge that was weighted with emotion because of the death of Steve Jobs. They were a company in mourning that also faced outside pressure and scrutiny over whether or not they'd be able to survive. And I just told people, that's the story I want to tell, and through the course of that, I also want to document how the company changed as a consequence of this leadership transition with Steve Jobs' death to Tim Cook's leadership. And then also this period of tremendous growth, because the company went from selling about 20 million iPhones a year to 200 million. And to support that, they added, somewhere upwards of 60,000 employees. So this is a period of dramatic change. It's unlike any that I've seen chronicled in business books in the past. And I felt there was a real value to documenting that. And many of the people I talked to agreed. They wanted their story, to stay on bookshelves for a long time.
Yeah, that's great. My understanding is neither Tim Cook nor Johnny Ive granted you interviews. Am I correct there? And I'm sure you tried. Was there any reason given why they didn't participate?
Right. They did not provide interviews. Again, to get back to this idea of corporate omerta, they kind of all collectively take a vow of silence, if you will. Not so much a vow of silence, but a commitment not to talk about Apple. It's like Fight Club, right? The only rule at Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. The only rule at Apple is you don't talk about Apple. And that's the case for the CEO, and that's the case for the design chief. So what I tried to do was talk to people who were closest to them, and that was where I tried to gather as much information as I could about these two central figures who really form the spine of the book. I mean, the book goes back and forth chapter by chapter between what each one of them are doing during the course of this decade to make sure the company endures after Steve Jobs' death.
So let's go back now 11 years. So Steve Jobs passes, and he's such a fascinating character. And if there's another book that you're looking to read, it's lengthy, but Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs is fascinating. But he was really a cultural icon, not just at Apple, but, across the world, really. So you not only have this founder, this visionary passing, but this cult-like figure. Take us back to Apple 11 years ago and the emotion, the feeling, and probably the uncertainty when Steve Jobs passed away.
Yeah. This is really, a lot of this is chronicled in the first chapter. I mean, Jobs had, had a recurrence of his cancer from years earlier. Over the last couple of years, he was increasingly less engaged and unable eventually to come into the office. But he continued to work throughout this time period. So many of his most senior employees were going to his house for business meetings to talk about the direction he wanted the company to go in. There was a sense that when he decided to pass off leadership of the company to Tim Cook in the summer of 2011 and transition into a chairman role, there was this kind of, willing denial on the part of the people who were closest with him, including Tim Cook, that he would be there for a long time, that he would continue to guide the company forward. So even though people knew he was in hospice care, when they went to have a big event in October to release the latest iPhone of that year, they hoped that he would show up at the theater for the event. He did not. And at the end of that event, his 5 or 6 most trusted lieutenants received a text from his wife saying, "You need to get to the house now." And he died a day after that iPhone was released. The grief was profound, and it lasted for more than a year. You get a flavor for that in the book through the description of Johnny Ive coming into work and looking, as you would expect, just someone just socked in mourning. And he would spend many of his days locked in conversation with a colleague, and the people that he worked with, it was about a team of about 20 designers, were looking on and saying that it looked like grief therapy that he was just going through. Tim Cook, meanwhile, closed the office that Steve Jobs had worked out of, didn't touch a thing. And over the course of the next year, as he was struggling with how to lead this company forward without the person who had founded it, he said he would just open the office and go and stand in it. Steve Jobs' daughter's last drawing was still on the whiteboard in the office, and he would just try to feel Steve Jobs' presence. But all of that, I think, speaks to how emotionally weighted this loss and death was, and how difficult it was for these people to pick up and carry on this company, which they wanted to do because they wanted to do that in honor of Steve Jobs' memory.
So Tim Cook, unfortunately a Duke graduate, Duke MBA, Tripp, I'm sure you picked up on that. Very, very different from Steve Jobs. Very, very different. Can you talk about, I guess, any similarities they have, but primarily the differences in their leadership styles?
The similarities they have is a similarity that's shared by a lot of people at Apple, period. And it's almost like a requirement for working there. And that's obsessive about doing high quality work and being a perfectionist and incredibly demanding. And that was Tim Cook's nature. And that was something that he shared with Steve Jobs. And because he was able to execute, and Tim Cook's role and what he brought to Apple was he essentially figured out a way to improve their manufacturing process and refine it so that they could make millions of products exactly the same to the very highest expectation that Jobs had in terms of the quality of the way it looked and the way it was machined. And that was not an easy thing, but the big thing that Tim Cook did to pull that off was set all of that up in China. But he's a more soft-spoken leader. He is somebody who's more analytical than Jobs. Jobs made many of his decisions by gut and instinct. Tim Cook likes to collect as much information as possible, think it over, and then make decisions. And so that transition where you went from a figure who had a lot of gifts and talents, including, marketing skills, design sensibilities, software expertise, engineering expertise, hardware engineering expertise, to somebody who was really skilled at manufacturing and operations, and also was more patient and careful and cautious in his decision making, was a real radical change for the company to adjust to.
A couple other differences I've noted were in the areas of politics and philanthropy. I like that cup, by the way. Jobs really, outside of a meeting with Obama years back, didn't really want to wade into politics, whereas Tim Cook has been much more vocal on certain issues, and also philanthropy. Jobs was notoriously, cheap is probably not the right word, but not very philanthropic, and believed that Apple's revenue and bottom line would be best for society rather than giving money away. Can you maybe touch upon those two things?
Yeah, one of the first things that Tim Cook came in came in and did, and that Jobs had resisted for a long time, was introduce a corporate matching program. And that signaled to employees that this is going to be a different style of leadership. And Jobs really, Jobs fought that for years. He just didn't think that was the best use of shareholders' money, even though that's fairly common at companies across the country. So Tim did come in and do that pretty quickly. The other thing that he did gradually over time, and part of this is a consequence of the way Apple changed, but he became very involved in DC. Jobs had a philosophy that if we make great product, then we don't need to be involved in DC because our product will speak for itself, and people and politicians will kind of, bend at our will because customers will demand it, and we'll have political influence, as a consequence of having a large customer base. Tim Cook ran into the realities of Apple becoming a much bigger company pretty soon after becoming CEO, because there was an investigation launched by the Senate subcommittee, subcommittee on investigations, and they unearthed information detailing how Apple had this kind of elaborate scheme in Ireland to duck and avoid a lot of U.S. taxes. And Tim Cook winds up getting brought before Congress relatively soon in his tenure, and realizes that Apple needs to, it has a higher profile now, and it needs to be more engaged in Washington than it was previously.
Okay, so I want to delve into the relationship between Johnny Ive, and again, as a reminder, brilliant designer. The iPhone that you probably have on your desk, he had a major role in, or the Apple Watch, just a phenomenal world-class designer. But he and Tim Cook, again, very different people. At times, that relationship was a bit fractured. Can you comment on that and maybe its impact on the company?
Yeah, fractured is an interesting word choice. I mean, you're really talking about two people that spoke two different languages that respected each other because of their individual and unique talents, but were also radically different. So Johnny Ive, even from birth, was very different from Tim Cook. He grew up in the UK. He was born there. His father was taught design to high school students. So he grew up wanting to be like his father and making things. Tim Cook, on the other hand, grew up in Southern Alabama. His father was a blue-collar dock worker in Mobile, and would rise early and drive about an hour from their rural town to get to work, and worked really hard. And Tim Cook grew up wanting to be quite different from his father. And from that moment forward, these two men kind of embark on a very different path in life. Tim Cook aspires to be an engineer, and he studies industrial engineering at Auburn. It's a unique field of engineering that's focused on kind of improving human systems, not necessarily just doing the other aspects of engineering that many people focus on. And Johnny Ive goes on to school to study design. He's one of the top talents at his design school in Newcastle. Leaves, and he gets a job at Apple relatively soon after leaving, and rises to the top of the company to lead their design division, and makes a name for himself because Steve Jobs decides to keep him as the head of design, and that design team literally saved Apple. The company was on the brink of bankruptcy in 1997, and they came out with one product. It was Steve Jobs' best shot at trying to resurrect and revive the company. And that product was the iMac, that transparent, colorful computer that we all remember from the late 90s. It was, at the time, the fastest selling computer in history. And it essentially saved Apple from bankruptcy. And that cemented Johnny's place inside the company as being somebody that was indispensable to what Steve Jobs wanted to accomplish over the next decade. But again, these are two very different figures. And so Steve Jobs kind of held them in balance by spending a lot of time with Johnny Ive and nurturing the design that the company did, and then trusting Tim Cook to execute on that design and make sure products are made. When Steve Jobs is out of the picture, that balance gets thrown off. You essentially have the engineer now responsible for the company, but Johnny Ive lost that kind of relationship that he appreciated so much with Steve Jobs, the editor, the muse that Steve Jobs was, who helped him make the products that he did.
Can you talk about some of the product development? Because this past decade, certainly a roller coaster for a bit of the products that Apple was producing. They had a bit of a debacle with the Apple Maps. Had some interesting challenges there. The development of the Apple Watch, the tinkering with the Apple Car, the driverless car. Can you talk about some of the product development, which again, basically all of us are consumers, but you tell some really interesting behind the scenes stories of some of these products and their development.
Yeah, Apple's a funny company in that they're unique because of this idea of secrecy. They like to kind of be like Moses, they want to come down from the mountaintop with like he did with the 10 Commandments. You don't really have a sense of where they came from. I mean, we do because the Bible chronicles it, but with Apple, it's like, oh, well, here's an iPhone. We just made it. You don't have a sense of how hard it was for them to make it. You don't have a sense of the obstacles they encountered along the way and how they overcame those. And so one of the things that I wanted to do with this book was demystify that a little bit and bring readers behind the scenes so that they could see what goes into the process of making a product. And that's most fully realized through the Apple Watch, which is the signature physical product that Apple released over the past decade. It was introduced in 2014 and released in 2015. And so what I did was I tried to talk about this elite design team that Johnny Ive led. It's a group of about 20 and how they made this product, and just give people a flavor of the different stages in that process and what they cared about. One thing that the book covers is the history and deep research that they did into time and the legacy of watches, and when we began to keep time and how we kept time, and when time moved from a clock tower in town to the wrist. And then what they wanted to do was somehow converge that with the computer as well. So you get a behind the scenes look at the research that goes into what they do. And then you also get a seat at the table as they struggle with the design that they were unhappy with. It looked at the time, according to them, a bit like a Fitbit, and they weren't happy with that. They didn't think that was like a very appealing look. It was too narrow, almost like they described it almost as like a rectangle, like a dog tag. And they wanted to change it, and Johnny Ive was dissatisfied. He brought in another designer named Martin Newson, and they had what amounted to kind of like a musician's jam session, but it was a designer's jam session where they're sketching in books and going back and forth with ideas. And they arrived at the design of the watch that we all wear today. And then the last step that I tried to get at is how they select materials and the perfection that they seek in those materials. And when they were looking to make the bands, they source swatches of leather from tanneries all over the world. Johnny Ive would come in, review those swatches, looking for how supple the leather was, how smooth it felt, whether or not it had any imperfections. He was so meticulous about that the the company actually debated at one point whether or not they should buy a cow farm, because he didn't want any leather with nicks in it. They were looking at buying a cattle farm so that they could remove the barbed wire and prevent any kind of nicking in the cattle. And eventually they settled on a tannery out of France that had this like legacy of making excellent leather. But I guess what I'm trying to say is you really get like just a snippet and flavor of what goes into making the products that we wear, and why when you put them on, they seem so carefully considered.
Also detected a real difference in Jobs and Tim Cook in terms of hands-on versus hands-off attention, to where Jobs would come by Ives, shop quite a bit, where Cook, they didn't see him as often. He was more hands-off. Am I correct in that statement?
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. For Jobs, that was where he loved to be. I mean, he really enjoyed design. He was so, I'm trying to think. He's so persnickety about how well things were made, that when he bought his first home, he didn't furnish it because he couldn't find furniture that met his like his very specific requirements for how well it was made, and so he loved being in the design studio that Johnny Ive ran, because he loved what they put into making a corner as rounded as they did. Tim Cook was not of that world and didn't feel comfortable in that world, so he seldom went to the design studio. And that was something that was difficult for Johnny Ive, because not only was he mourning this loss, but then his connection to the person who was CEO, when Tim Cook became the successor, was not as tight a bond and as he enjoyed with Steve Jobs himself.
One of the big projects that Apple achieved over the last 10 years was the construction of its headquarters, which I'm trying to remember how much it cost.
$5 billion.
$5 billion with a B. If you haven't seen, maybe we can pull up a link here to what it looks like. If you haven't seen the headquarters, it basically looks like a massive spaceship was dropped into the land there in Cupertino. Tripp, can you talk about how, I think it was neat too, how, again, I think that project carried on the legacy of what Steve Jobs would have wanted out of that facility, how it impacted the culture, how employees embraced it. Just a massive, massive undertaking with the construction of Apple's new headquarters.
Yeah. I mean, the project began in earnest while Steve Jobs was still alive, and one of his last public appearances was before the Cupertino council to pitch them on what he wanted to build. But that project didn't get underway until after his death, and it fell to Johnny Ive to kind of see it through to its conclusion. It really is a stunning facility. I mean, it's amazing. It is so large that you could drop the Empire State Building down inside the middle of it. If you laid it flat on its side, that's how expansive this circle is. And then inside the circle, it's almost entirely glass. And so you have strange moments where they also did things like brought to life some of the marketing that Apple has done over the years. If you sit in the expansive cafeteria that they have there, they're on the far side of the cafeteria, there are large, walkways that span the length of this wide open space. And when people walk past midday during lunch, they look like they're backlit and look like the silhouettes in Apple's famous iPod commercials. It really is like a modern marvel, but at the same time, there are like little hints of some of the imperfections that began to arrive without jobs there to oversee things. One of those was that the glass is everywhere and all the doors are all glass. There's not a real clear line that you're walking towards a door at times. And so when people first moved in, they would walk straight into a door and wind up with bloody noses. There were a lot of 911 calls and concerns about this. And so shortly after moving in, they had to take little black stickers and put them over the doors so that people knew they were approaching a door when they got to it, so they wouldn't hurt themselves. And those stickers became known as Johnny's Tears because they were these minor imperfections in this clear glass that Johnny Ive had wanted to encircle the campus. Anyway, but it really is a remarkable place. Yeah.
Couple last questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience, who I encourage you to go ahead and start dropping your questions into the chat. On a personal note, Tim Cook really revealed to the world that he is a gay man. And, you know, not sure how widely known that was within Apple, but, you know, was a major announcement, and, you know, has been vocal about that, and is even, I think, you know, he's from Alabama, but Apple will not have a presence. If you can mute, if you're not on mute, please go ahead and mute. Apple will not have a presence in Alabama until some of the legislation, I believe, around hate crimes and discrimination are changed. Can you talk about that announcement, how it resonated with Apple employees and its implications beyond that?
Yeah, you know, the book has a whole chapter devoted to this, and I think one of the interesting things about it that it illuminates is that while, you know, is that Tim was very thoughtful about the timing of when he made this announcement. He did so in late 2014 or the fall of 2014. This is on the heels of Apple introducing the Apple Watch, which answered a kind of an external question: would it make anything new after Steve Jobs? And then it also introduced the iPhone 6, which is a phone that radically changed the trajectory of its business. They sold so many iPhones that year in China that their China business rose by 85%. It was just kind of a rocket ship for their business. Tim Cook knew both of those things were important and put the company on stable footing. And as he talked to the top leadership at the company, people in the C-suite, about his decision to announce publicly that he was gay, he made it clear that he was doing so from a position of strength. He previously hadn't chosen to do so at the outset of his time 3 years earlier as CEO, because he said he didn't want to be the first CEO to fail after Steve Jobs, much less the first gay CEO to fail after Steve Jobs. He thought that if that were known and that were public, and he did not succeed, he would set back opportunities for gay, lesbian, and bisexual and transgendered executives in corporate America for years. And so he was very sensible about this. It was very calculated. And, you know, of course, the way he handled it and announced it was through a personal essay that ran in Bloomberg Businessweek. It was this very understated thing. He didn't do any real interviews about it. He's, you know, known to be very private, and this was in step with that. And it was also praised because of how he did it. I mean, it was basically saying, you know, it was heralded because it basically said, "This is who I am, and that shouldn't be a big deal." And he put the focus back on the company pretty soon thereafter. But it was well received both by employees and people, you know, outside of Apple.
The last two questions I have, really a quick answer here, but how long you see Tim Cook stayed in this role, and is a successor being groomed?
Tim Cook signed what amounted to a 5-year contract extension, I think a year ago, which should take him through 2025, through the end of 2025. He's still relatively young. He's still, he's 61 now. He's still very committed to what he's doing at Apple and what Apple's doing. It's easy to imagine him staying on and extending his leadership for a while longer. It's harder to imagine him stepping back because he's so committed to the company. But yeah, so I don't really have like a great answer for you on that one. I would have thought like, oh yeah, no, he'll step back in 2025. But the more I talk to people, the more people close to him think he'll extend it longer and stay on longer, almost as Bob Iger did. It just became this kind of like perpetual thing where, nobody thought Bob would ever leave until he finally did.
Yeah. Last question. How's the book been received from Apple? You've gotten tremendous reviews in, top papers, top publications across the country. I have my own book, so I'm hesitant to review things on Amazon, but I looked at your reviews and you've got across the board 5-star reviews. Have you heard anything from Apple, even perhaps Tim Cook, on how the book's been received?
Yeah, I mean, they're not happy about the book. Again, this is a company that really prefers to control its own narrative and not have someone else chronicle its story. And so I'm a fly in the ointment, if you will. And they've sort of treated me as such. But that's pretty much their kind of approach to press in general. So it's not abnormal. I mean, the thing that I've appreciated is hearing from people who were willing to go out and tell their story and share that with me, and who've sat down and spent time with the book and said that for them it was cathartic to read because they, this is a very siloed company, and so they didn't always know what was going on in other divisions. And this gave them a sense of the totality of what happened over the course of the past decade, and was healing for them in many ways.
Okay. Great stuff. I'm going to read through some questions here. We've got about 10 minutes left. What is the future of Apple now for new products and sustaining its current ones?
What is the future of Apple for sustaining its current lineup of product?
I guess product development. What do you see moving forward in the future with Apple products?
I saw another question here from Jeff. I'm going to couple those together because he asked also about a recent report that we had in the Times 2 weeks ago about Johnny Ive and Apple, which reached an agreement to have a contract and consulting agreement, and that's been dissolved. It's been discontinued. And so he asked about how Apple will make products going forward. So these two kind of go together. But, Apple's in this phase of incremental improvement. The Tim Cook era has really been a period of method over magic, if you think about it. They've only introduced one, quote unquote, new product category, and that's the Apple Watch. It's been 10 years with one new product category. The prior decade, they had 3 at least. They're on the precipice of introducing one new product with the Apple headset. The way the process has evolved in the absence of Johnny Ive is that increasingly there's a division called product marketing that is kind of in tune with what customers want. And rather than design leading how a product is developed, product marketing is having more influence over it. And so how that changes or shapes the products that we see coming out of Apple is something we'll all discover over the next few years.
Got another one about Apple and how they promote recycling and environmental leadership, given climate warming and change. I think you touch upon that in the book.
A little bit. I think that's something that is really important to the company. I'm not sure what Greg's background is. It's a great question. I mean, Apple's got challenges with this, right? I mean, it is in the tech industry. It, by its very nature, makes products with born-in obsolescence. They're only going to have a lifespan of so many years, and so what they've tried to do to address the fact that their products eventually become obsolete is they build a robot that is capable of of recycling and like breaking down some of the iPhones they've been making. But it's early days in that, and they haven't quite fully got their arms around that. On their broader climate change initiatives, they have gotten the corporation to quote unquote net neutral carbon footprint, but the corporation is not the biggest output of carbon for the company. I mean, their carbon footprint is really their supply chain in China. They don't own those factories, but those factories are the ones that generate much of the carbon emissions for the company. And so they've set a goal of trying to get those factories to carbon neutral, net carbon neutral, I think by 2030.
Another question here, and I'm not sure you can answer this given confidentiality, but did you speak with Angela Ahrendts, who was Executive Vice President of Marketing at Apple before she left in 2019? She is a native Hoosier from New Palestine and a Ball State graduate, former CEO of Burberry.
Right. I mean, you're dead on there, Graham. I can't speak to who all I talked to for the book for confidentiality reasons. However, Angela is covered in the book. She came in. There was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm about her arrival and what she might be able to offer the company. And she left and exited in kind of this period where a number of people like herself, I mean, she's really a marketer at heart. She's got really creative sensibilities, exited the company kind of concurrently. And this is the arc of the book as the company became more and more operational in its focus.
Okay, we still have a time for a couple more questions. I'm going to ask a couple, but please chime in now or forever hold your peace. What was the biggest challenge in writing this book, and what's been the biggest reward for you?
God, the two big challenges, we touched on the challenge of trying to gather the material and just the secretive nature of Apple and getting enough material to make the book reality. That was difficult. Structuring the book was really, really hard. I started with a vision for a book that would somewhat simplistically have 10 chapters, and each chapter would chronicle a year at Apple in the decade after Steve Jobs. It was silly and didn't work out that way, in large part because it ignored kind of the obvious thing that I discovered as I began writing, which was just that you had these two foils at Apple, and Tim Cook and Johnny Ive, and it was a much more compelling story to focus on the two of them and how Johnny was an extension of what Steve Jobs wanted Apple to be that eventually flames out. And at the same time, Tim Cook's focus and direction of the company takes flight. And so I chose to kind of revamp and restructure the book. It was a difficult decision that I arrived at about, I don't know, 4 chapters into it. But once I did that, the book kind of opened up and I was able to get it done.
There are 2, I think, brand new books out relating to the tech leadership space. I'm just curious if you've heard of them, if you've purchased them, read them. There's a new book, tragic book on Tony Hsieh, the Zappos founder and CEO. And then there's a book I'm working through right now on the collaboration and creation of PayPal. Have you delved into those two by chance?
I haven't delved into the book on PayPal. I've read portions of the Tony Hsieh book, Happy at Any Cost. It was written by a couple of Wall Street Journal colleagues of mine, including Kirsten Grind, who works out of San Francisco and sat literally right behind me when she was doing a lot of the work on it. So yeah, I've been thrilled to see that one get out the door. I hope you're enjoying it.
I finished it in about 2 days, like your book, and it really
Okay.
tragic. I don't know if you're familiar with Zappos. I actually talked to her yesterday. I think she's also going to speak to us, but
Oh, good. I was going to offer to help if I could. Yeah.
Yeah, put a good word in for me. But tragic book, and I won't go into detail. But we're not only going to talk about the book, but mental health, which is a big piece of that book. But two really good reads. We're wrapping up. Any last questions for Tripp?
What's the name of the book? The name of the book again. The name of the book again.
It's After Steve: How Apple Became a $1 trillion company and Lost its Soul.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Kelly,
thanks for your interest.
Kelly, let's put that link in one more time. Two things I'm going to ask from the audience. Again, if you're looking for a really interesting read, many of you are leaders yourselves in companies. Let's do our best to support the book. So many great lessons that I took from it. And, Tripp could be doing a lot of things with his time right now, but spend an hour with us. And the other thing is, I'm going to ask Kelly to share the recording with us. And I'm going to ask you to send it to one person. Because again, with what we're doing right now with the club is trying to get really high-level speakers, interesting speakers, which we've had today. And, as we try to grow our membership, showcase, what a great speaker that we had today. So how about a virtual round of applause for Tripp here? And Tripp, a donation is going to be made in your honor to Any Given Child Indy, an Arts Council of Indianapolis initiative that ensures that all 22,000 public school students, kindergarten through 8th grade, have equitable access to the creative arts. We're going to be making that donation in your name. And
that's fantastic, Graham. That this may be lost on people who haven't read the book yet, but the book really is focused on kind of the tension between art and commerce, and so I think that's really fitting that you guys would make that donation. That's fantastic. Thank you.
And on a personal note, I'm always proud to see Wake Forest Demon Deacons doing great work. So we hope you keep it up. Hope you have another book in store. I'll definitely be buying it. But let's do our best to support Tripp's work. And next week we will be back in person live at the Columbia Club, and Fishers Parks Director Sarah Sandquist will be speaking about Geist Waterfront Park and the Nickel Plate Trail. So really hope to see you in person. And Tripp, thanks so much again for your time. Meeting is adjourned. I wish everybody a wonderful week here.
Thank you again, everybody. It's wonderful to see you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tripp.